Hello everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the Holland Land Office Museum's Artifact video series. My name is Ryan Duffy and I'm the director of the museum. And this week we're going to talk about one of the most influential businesses and probably the largest manufacturer in Batavia's history, and that is the Johnston Harvester Company. Now, it was not always known as the Johnston Harvester Company, as it soon changed many names, first becoming the Massey Harris Company, then the Massey Harris Ferguson Company while still in Batavia, though has since gone on to other names after moving out of Batavia. However, though it grew to its largest point in Batavia, Johnston Harvester does not begin in Batavia, and it actually begins in several different locations before eventually becoming what we see it become in Batavia. Now, it was started by two men, Byron Huntley and Samuel Johnston, though they both were involved in agricultural manufacturing long before they ever get together to form Johnston Harvester Company. Now, Byron Huntley was born in 1830 in Mexico, New York, and eventually makes his way to Brockport in 1850 to start up a small farm machinery plant to specialize in reapers, which were meant to harvest grain in a more efficient manner with less manual labor. This was sort of the beginning of the Industrial Revolution here in the United States, and agricultural equipment was at the forefront of the transfer to more mechanized labor. Now, his future partner, Samuel Johnston, was actually born in a small hamlet named Shelby, New York, and he got involved into the agricultural manufacturing field as well. However, he was more on the inventing side and actually invented a handheld corn husker. That was his first big blip on the map, and this eventually takes him to Buffalo and then Syracuse and then eventually Brockport, where he continues to invent different implements. Johnston would be responsible for several more patents in his time before eventually joining with Huntley in 1868 and building their factory in Brockport. The partnership between Huntley and Johnston would only last a few years, as in 1874, Johnston would actually split off and go back to making his own implements, while Huntley would stay on as the president of the company, though he continued to use Johnston's name in the company name. Catastrophe would then strike the company, as in 1882, their plant was destroyed in a massive fire in Brockport that destroyed a large portion of the village at that time, and this forced them to look for a new site for their factory. Now, they eventually chose Batavia after looking around the local area, mainly because of the many railroad extensions that came into Batavia, which were crucial for them to get their supplies in and their products out. And this was further incentivized by the citizens of Batavia, as they actually set aside a 14-acre plot of land on Cemetery Street for the factory to be built. Now, many may ask, where's Cemetery Street in Batavia? Well, today it's known as Harvester Ave, named after the factory that is eventually built there. But it was called Cemetery Street as the Batavia Cemetery was located there. So they ended up building the Johnston Harvester factory right across the street from the Batavia Cemetery. Now, Johnston Harvester went through many ups and downs while in Batavia. Only 5 years into their existence in 1888, they almost suffered bankruptcy, though they were able to pull themselves out of it. And Byron Huntley would serve as president until his death in 1906, as the company began to increase its production. However, the Johnston Harvester name would not last very long, as it would soon be bought out in 1910 by a Canadian company named Massey Harris, who was looking to expand into the American market. For the time being, though, the Johnston Harvester name would stick around under Massey Harris's ownership, as they bought 75% of the operating stock within the company. In 1913, they had actually sold over $17 million worth of product to various markets, and by 1917, Massey Harris bought the remaining stock in the company and dropped the Johnston Harvester name altogether. So the plant would now be known as the Massey Harris plant. During the 1920s, Massey Harris, like many other industries, suffered huge up and downs following World War I, as the farm equipment market took a tumble after the war effort. However, they were able to stay afloat through their Clipper Combine product line, which was meant to target smaller farmers who were able to use this to better harvest their crops, particularly grain, and was easier to buy and cheaper to maintain than some of their larger equipment that they had previously focused upon. During World War II, the plant was actually pretty well silent during the war effort. It was actually the largest plant in North America that was not designated for war effort production. And due to the lack of need for farm equipment, at least at that time, Massey Harris was not doing very well. Yet the company was able to survive into the 1950s, though this is where it ran into major difficulties. In 1953, a major labor dispute resulted in a 4-month strike, which nearly destroyed the company. And in the following year, they merged with Ferguson, which was a British agricultural manufacturing company, and they were now known as Massey Harris Ferguson. With the new merger, though, this put even more pressure on the struggling Batavia plant, and essentially they were given the options of increased production and profit, or it would be closed. And they were able to hang on for another 4 years before the plant was closed in 1958. Though with the closure of the Massey Harris Ferguson plant, this was not the end of what we know as the Johnston Harvester plant buildings, as it was able to find reuse in the next decades, as it became the focal point for a business incubator program, actually one of the first in the world. This project, headed by the Mancuso family, was meant to help integrate small and upcoming businesses and reuse this massive industrial complex to good use and to help grow new businesses. And it was quite successful, and the blueprint for this was used all around the world in many different facets. And even today, the building is being used by many different arts groups and businesses revolved around different artistic endeavors. So even though Massey Harris Ferguson, previously Johnston Harvester, has not been in production at the plant for over 60 years, it's still having some use and still a huge part of the Batavia community. Now we have several items from the Johnston Harvester history here, from signs, advertising materials, plant materials, pieces from the plant that were manufactured for their different combines and clippers and different agricultural equipment, as it's still one of the major names here in Batavia's history and something that most people can recognize instantly. So if you'd like to come and check out some of those items, feel free to stop by the museum and we'll be happy to show them off and give you a little bit more of their story behind them. So we hope you enjoyed this edition of our Artifact video series, and if you've missed any in the past, feel free to go check them out on our YouTube channel, Holland Land Office Museum, and feel free to stick around for the coming ones, as we'll be putting these out every week, talking about different parts of our local history here in Genesee County.